John Kramer is back with a brand new set of death traps and nefarious intentions, so here's everything you need to know before watching Saw X. Horror movies aren't just reserved for the spooky season, with freaky films popping up all year round. But there is something about a horror flick being released around Halloween that gives it a particularly special feel. Luckily for gorehounds, Saw X will start the scary celebration with a blood-soaked bang, as it's hitting theaters on September 29, 2023. Interestingly, Saw X finds itself sandwiched between quite a few noteworthy horror titles. It'll be following in the wake of The Nun 2, but it's coming out before other creepy flicks such as The Exorcist Believer and Five Nights at Freddy's. Basically, Halloween season 2023 is going to be an absolute treat for anyone wanting to celebrate at the theater, and Saw X is sure to deliver the goods when it kicks off the frightful festivities. We know the film is actually going to be something of a prequel, taking place after the original Saw movie but before the events of Saw 2. That means we'll be following John Kramer during his final days, battling cancer and searching for some sort of miracle cure. John's desperation will take him to Mexico, where he's hoping to sign up for an experimental medical procedure. Unfortunately, John finds out there's no actual cure. The people making lofty promises are all con artists, and there's no hope for John's health below the border. Of course, now that the Jigsaw Killer has traveled all this way, he isn't going to waste the opportunity to murder some people now, is he? Furious at the scammers for taking advantage of hopeless people, John decides it's time to play a game. Soon enough, the folks who lured John to Mexico with promises of salvation will find themselves trapped in the hell of Jigsaw's making and punished for their sins.
Let the game begin.
Going into Saw X, fans of the series wanted to know only one thing: would Tobin Bell reprise his role as John Kramer? The good news is, Bell is indeed coming back. Remarking on his return, the franchise producers expressed excitement at Bell's return, and mentioned how the John Kramer character is a major part of the franchise's success. Director Kevin Grutert agreed with this sentiment, telling Empire that Saw X would focus on Jigsaw more than any other film in the series. We'll also see quite a few new faces populating the screen, with a talented cast including the likes of Stephen Brand, Michael Beach, Renata Vaca, Paulette Hernandez, Joshua Okamoto, Octavia Inohosa, and Sanova Makodi Lund. But will we see any former Saw stars return alongside Tobin Bell? It's entirely possible. Shawnee Smith is definitely returning as John Kramer apprentice Amanda Young, and for a while there was a rumor that Carrie Elwes could return as serial killer Dr. Lawrence Gordon. Unfortunately for fans, Elwes told Scream Rant in April 2023, "I have no comment one way or the other about that franchise. I really can't speak to it. I'm happy for the filmmakers that they continue to make money, and that it seems to be a financial bonus for them. I really can't speak to it because I'm not really involved anymore." Director Kevin Grutert is no stranger to the Saw franchise, as he helmed 2009's Saw 6 and 2010's Saw 3D. While those were his first two feature film directorial pursuits, he's followed them up with three more horror thrillers: Jezebel, Visions, and Jackals. Of course, he isn't the only Saw alum working behind the scenes. Peter Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg have penned the screenplay, and their credits include both Spiral and Jigsaw, proving they're incredibly familiar with the nefarious games and sadistic challenges of the Saw franchise. To hear Grutert tell it, Saw X is going to be his greatest contribution to the series yet. Back in February 2023, when shooting wrapped on the movie, Grutert gave fans an update on the site formerly known as Twitter, saying, "It was one of the most rewarding and epic experiences of my life." Grutert went on to say that he wanted to use Saw X as a title for the new movie. For die-hard fans, Grutert promised the film would get back to the core of the franchise and focus on John Kramer. Fans will have to decide for themselves if Saw X lives up to Grutert's enthusiasm. It might be hard to remember the last time there was a new Saw movie because the last time the franchise came to the big screen, it delivered a spin-off story. 2021's Spiral from the Book of Saw told the story of Detective Zeke Banks, searching for a serial killer clearly inspired by Jigsaw. Despite all the deviously deadly traps on display in Spiral, its director insisted it wasn't a Saw movie. Speaking to the AU review, he said, "This is not the 9th film in the Saw franchise. There easily could be a Saw 9 that follows Jigsaw." Saw X seems to prove Bowsman's remark completely wrong. It implies that Spiral was a Saw movie and completely avoids picking up where Jigsaw left off at the same time. Saw X is jumping back in time all the way back to the early 2000s, when John Kramer is still alive and wreaking havoc. So it's safe to say we won't be seeing Detective Banks in this outing. It's disappointing since the twisty ending of Spiral left fans with a serious cliffhanger. Undoubtedly, there will be many fans wondering what would have happened next in Detective Banks' journey, and if he would have finally got revenge for what Emerson did. If that's the case, what was the point of Spiral leaving things so open-ended in the first place? It seems likely that Spiral was meant to kick off a new era for the Saw franchise. Having from the Book of Saw in its title clearly set Spiral apart from the rest of the series and implied that there were more stories like it to tell. The plan might have been to expand on Detective Banks' story and to look at more serial killers inspired by Jigsaw's legacy. That plan didn't work out because the numbers didn't support it. Spiral completely bombed at the box office in its opening weekend, which definitely dumped cold water on the potential for Spiral 2. Now that Saw X has taken the series back to its roots, the Book of Saw might officially be closed.
Wait, I thought the Jigsaw Killer was dead.
Yeah, but if it's another copycat,
it's gonna be a show.
It might come as a surprise that Saw X is traveling back in time to the early 2000s, but it really shouldn't. The horror genre is well known for taking the occasional odd left turn after a series has been kicking around for a long time. After we sent Jason to space, everything was on the table. Fans of this particular franchise should already be used to chronological shenanigans. For one thing, Saw 3 and Saw 4 happen simultaneously, and the viewer only realizes it later. Piecing together the entire Saw franchise timeline involves more than just watching the movies in order. Many characters, including the all-important John Kramer, have their backstories explained in flashback sequences, only after they've hung around for several movies. There's only one reason that Saw X is going so far back in the timeline, and fans will probably agree it's a good one. John Kramer, the original Jigsaw, died all the way back in Saw 3. Since then, the franchise has included him in flashbacks and prequel stories, or mostly following copycat killers. Saw X is bringing the franchise back to where it started by setting its story in the past and letting John Kramer return to the spotlight for real. It may be good to know that Saw X is in experienced hands, but regardless of who's working on the movie behind the camera, fans are showing up for the man who's on screen. Tobin Bell helped bring Jigsaw to life in the original Saw, and he's been the core of the franchise ever since. Bell has been in every Saw movie except for 2021's Spiral, and he's clearly excited to get a chance to return to the character. In an interview with Build, Bell talked about what has kept him so engaged with the character for the past 2 decades.
He's got a huge dimension as a character. He's a bit of a philosopher.
Bell added that he'd always be willing to play a character that interested him as much as Jigsaw. He also talked about the potential for Saw X to introduce the character to audiences who were too young to see the original Saw and its immediate sequels in theaters. If there really is a huge influx of new fans, Saw X will be just the beginning of a new slate of Saw movies. There are many words that could accurately describe John Kramer, but hero definitely isn't one of them. As Jigsaw, John has killed more people than anyone can count, and he's developed some of the most gruesome ways to murder people that the world has ever seen. Despite that, Saw X does seem to be putting John into the position of a typical horror movie hero. In the movie, John goes to Mexico City to seek specialized treatment for his terminal cancer. The people who treat him are scammers who want to steal his money by convincing him they're medical professionals. When John realizes that he's been ripped off, he sets about punishing the scammers with his usual assortment of horrifying traps. Whether or not that premise goes far enough to justify John's brutal murders is up to the fans, but Saw X goes out of its way to make John the frontman of the movie. Speaking about the film at a fan panel Midsummer Scream 2023, producer Oren Kulis said, "John Kramer is absolutely the protagonist in this movie." The producer confirmed that what John experiences makes him the hero of the film. Maybe anti-hero would be a more accurate term. But Kulis's point is important. Fans who have been dying to see more John Kramer finally have a movie where he's a real lead character. 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of the first Saw movie. Directed by James Wan, Saw caught the attention of so many horror fans because of its no-holds-barred approach to on-screen violence and its remarkable twist ending. The franchise has never exactly been a critical darling, but it kept filling theaters, so the series continued. But Saw has seen better days. We've come a long way since the yearly releases of the late 2000s. Nowadays, Saw movies are few and far between, and they aren't guaranteed to be successes. Spiral had such an abysmal box office performance that some were wondering if it meant the franchise was finally dead. Saw X proves that there's still some room for the series to keep going. Clearly, the people responsible for making Saw movies still believe in them. Tobin Bell is still excited by the characters, and producers and directors are willing to put time and money into making a new movie. On the other hand, Saw X could end up being a swan song for the series. One way or another, the future of the entire franchise rests on how well Saw X is received when it finally debuts.
oh yes.
there will be blood.
What's in a name? Saw X might seem like an obvious title choice, but there's actually a little bit of depth to the name. It seemingly confirms that Spiral was the 9th Saw movie, regardless of what its director had to say. But this latest installment isn't taking a cue from Fast X with its title either. Instead, Saw X is borrowing a title formula from the franchise's early days to make it loud and clear that John Kramer has returned and Saw is back in fighting form. When Saw was just starting, every movie in this series got a Roman numeral after the title. That finally changed with 2010's Saw 3D, which made an ill-fated attempt to bring Saw into a new dimension. Since then, Jigsaw and Spiral are the only Saw movies we've gotten. Saw X is calling back to the original films with its title, and by placing its story right back in the good old days of the franchise. All the Saw movies end up in a grimy warehouse at one point or another because that's where Jigsaw sets up his traps. The movies haven't ever spent much time exploring the city beyond those warehouses. Even Spiral, which spent more time out in the daylight than any other Saw movie, never really clarified the setting. For all the incredible attention to detail that Saw pays to the intricate backstory of its main character and the torturous traps he invents, the movies never even tell us where they take place. Don't expect that to be the case with Saw X. The trend of setting location-agnostic stories is going out the window with the franchise's latest installment. In the movie, John heads to Mexico City in search of cancer treatment, and the city is going to play a huge role in the story. Saw X was shot on location in Mexico City, so we'll get to see all the sights alongside John before the trap-making gets underway. Taking John Kramer to Mexico pulls the franchise out of the US and into a specific location for the very first time. The change gives the movie a chance to tell a new kind of story, and it thrilled the people who are working on Saw X. Speaking to fans at Midsummer Scream 2023, Saw X production designer Anthony Stabley said, "For us from the get-go, we were already winning because Mexico is so exotic, and John Kramer's like a fish out of water. Finally pushing John into a space where he's not in control lets fans see the character in a whole new light. Also, it makes for a welcome change to the usual locations where he lets his nefarious imagination run wild." Director Kevin Grutert knows exactly where the Saw franchise has been before, and he wanted to use Mexico City as fuel for telling a story that Saw fans haven't already seen previously. Speaking at Midsummer Scream 2023, he said, "There's such a mythology, the city is so amazing, we can't speak enough about it. And just that, there's a certain creepiness to it and a certain history, and it just absolutely worked for us."
Withstood the test of time.
Coming in at 1 hour and 58 minutes, Saw X is the longest film in the series to date. Naturally, that means there will be enough time to show off the real main attraction of the movie. And what everyone is here for, the traps. As with every new Saw movie, you can expect Saw X to be filled with brand new, hyper-violent contraptions. The poster for the movie already gives a hint of what to expect. It shows someone locked into a set of creepy goggles that have tubes connected to the eyes. Whatever the device is meant to do, watching it in action will probably make you cringe and have sympathy pains. The official Saw X trailer also gives us a few brief glances at John's inventions in the movie. It shows a group of people chained up inside a classic Saw warehouse. One woman appears to have a saw blade set up in front of her neck. A panicked man is strapped into some kind of modified electric chair. In a different shot, we can see a jigsaw puppet wheeling out surgical supplies to John's victims. From the little we've seen, Saw X looks to be as gruesome as its predecessors. Every time a series introduces a new prequel, the chances for retconning skyrocket. Altering a story's past is one of the best ways to dramatically change its future. On the surface, Saw X seems like a perfect opportunity for the Saw canon to reinvent itself. Maybe John Kramer had a secret child. Or perhaps his time in Mexico City gave him the perfect strategy for faking his death at the end of Saw 3, and he's been alive all this time. Saw X could hit the restart button for the franchise in any number of ways, but it probably won't. If the franchise really wanted to take things in a different direction, it probably wouldn't be diving back into John Kramer's past at all. John has been dead for the majority of the franchise's existence at this point, so retconning his death would completely ruin the story of most of the movies. Aside from John's death, there's really no big event in this series that is even remotely asking for a retcon. It seems pretty safe to assume that Saw X is going back in time to just give us another Jigsaw story, and it probably won't do anything that impacts what the rest of the series has already established. The latest installment's director, Kevin Grutert, thinks that the franchise could continue, but he's not entirely sure how. Speaking to SFX, he said, "There's no obvious direction to go after this film, but I think there probably will be more Saw movies, particularly if this one is successful."
I'm long gone from this world.
Considering that the original Saw came out in 2004, there's now an entire generation of moviegoers who missed out on the franchise's heyday. Saw made enough of a cultural impact that even people who were young enough to miss actually seeing the movie probably knew a little about its premise. There's an extensive backlog of Saw movies for new fans to brush up on, but it's probably not necessary to see them all before showing up at the theater for Saw X. Anyone who's looking for the bare minimum catch-up story before Saw X should at least watch the original movie. It takes place right before the events of Saw X, but to really get the full context, it's also worth watching Saw 2 and Saw 3, which carry the story through to the death of John Kramer. After that, watching Saw 4 all the way through to Jigsaw will give fans the fullest possible picture of John's story and the lives of the killers he inspired. Beyond that, true completionists can check out Spiral, if they haven't already.